Hey everyone, this is Brad Hughes, School Principal and Chief Encouragement Officer from Ontario, Canada. And I've got some good news for you. You found the Good News, Brad News podcast, amplifying stories of heart-led educators moving from positive intention to action. Great people like you, improving kids' lives through service, connection, and finding the fun. So glad you're here. Let's get started. Hey everyone, it feels amazing to welcome you back to the Good News, Brad News podcast. And it's time for high fives all around as we get underway with episode 5 of Good News, Brad News. I am your host, Brad Hughes, and as you settle in and get comfortable, you'll be excited to learn that you've tuned in for a double feature. That's right, today I'm doubly excited to introduce you to not one, but two guests, a truly dynamic duo, Carli Parsons and Sandy Millar, both high school leaders and innovators from Waterloo Region, Ontario, Canada, and co-founders of InnovatED, a professional learning and consulting venture. And as you'll hear, Carli and Sandy each are partners and parents, mentors, content producers, staff developers, and advocates for the kind of teaching and learning that prepares students to create, contribute, and build community. Now, Carli, Sandy, and I discuss a number of things near and dear to my heart, including how engaging content contributes to belonging and well-being for students, developing clarity of purpose through adversity, and the restorative power of professional and family relationships as we reckon with all of life's challenges and changes. My conversation with Carli and Sandy reminded me of 3 important words from my friend and colleague, Dr. Dave Schmittou. Those 3 words: people grow people. Carli and Sandy describe how a commitment to growing others results in growing ourselves. That commitment means we're ready to welcome others where they are, not where anyone thinks they should be. It means we're open to the unexpected opportunities that tough times may bring, and that there's tremendous promise and power in working as a team to supercharge and celebrate that growth. I know you'll enjoy getting to know Carli and Sandy today, and after hearing their story, you'll be eager to connect with them too. So, here's my interview with Carli Parsons and Sandy Millar today on the Good News, Brad News podcast. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Good News, Brad News podcast. Have I got a treat for you tonight? 2 heart-led educators, 2 leaders, 2 passionate developers of kids. Their names are Carli Parsons and Sandy Millar. Welcome both of you to Good News, Brad News.
Hi, Brad. Thanks for having us.
Hi, thanks so much for having us.
We have a number of firsts tonight. This is my first opportunity to interview a dynamic duo. You are the first secondary school or high school educators on the Good News, Brad News show. And you're also the first school leaders. And as a school leader myself, I'm really interested in digging in with you about why you do what you do. What was your calling to school leadership, how that transition from teaching leadership has been for you. But for those that haven't yet gotten to know you, tell us a little bit about each of yourselves. What makes you tick? What are all the different roles that you play in your school and your family and your community? And help us to get to know you. Maybe I'll start with Sandy.
Okay. Well, as you know, my name is Sandy. I'm currently one of the vice principals with our distance learning program. I started that this September, so that's been an interesting leadership journey for me. Prior to that, I was a vice principal. It's where I was a teacher as well. I taught student leadership actually for 7 years. In that time, I was pretty heavily involved in the student leadership scene across Ontario and Canada. I ended up co-chairing the Canadian Student Leadership Conference in 2017. So that was a big sort of professional accomplishment in my life. And since then, as a VP at SGM, one thing I'm really proud of is we put in a program called the Innovation Lab, which is sort of a high school version of a startup tech incubator in our high school, which was pretty exciting. Personally, I have a wonderful wife named Hillary, two great kids, Alex and Avery, who are 1 and 3. Yeah, that's a little bit about myself.
Carli, over to you.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Carli Parsons, and I'm also a vice principal as well. Sandy and I were vice principal partners before he was moved to the secondary distance learning program at the start of September in the midst of this global pandemic. Before that, I taught for 10 years. I've been an English teacher, a history teacher, and most recently, I was a student success teacher, which was pretty transformational for me in terms of my leadership journey. I have 2 kids, Elliot and Frankie, and my husband, Charlie, and we live in Kitchener.
When I hear you both introduce yourselves, I hear words like service, leadership, innovation, and we happen to live in a part of the province of Ontario, Canada, that's known as an innovation hub. And so I want to touch with you on what innovation means to you. I know that you're also really keen to develop future leaders and future ready kids. But if we just take a step back and talk with me about your commitment and how that transition from teaching in your previous roles, how your transition to school leadership has really crystallized for you this sense of being a servant leader, because I know that you both describe yourselves in terms of servant leadership. So how has that transition been for you, and what brings that service aspect of leadership to you?
That's a great question, Brad. Just to go back to your first thought there about where we live and it being a hub for innovation, I do think we're really lucky to live in the Kitchener-Waterloo region, also kind of affectionately known as the Silicon Valley of southwestern Ontario. And we do have so many opportunities right within our community to witness innovation happening. We have more startups than anywhere else in the province. We host Google, we host Communitech, and we host, companies who are moving really quickly in that sector. And so that's been really neat, I think, for Sandy and I to be able to connect with those community partners and to see the ways that they're committed to helping to advance our own students. That's been a really big and pivotal thing for, I think, the both of us. And in terms of servant leadership and how that's a natural transition, I think, from teaching into admin, that really has been the best part about it for me. I always have loved helping in any capacity that I could. And a big part of that for me was running PD at my schools and being involved with helping to bring people along in their own teaching and learning. And so when I got into admin, I was really pleased to find out that every single day I was able to help someone in some capacity. And so that, I think, the best part about the move into this role.
Sandy, I'm thinking about your role too in student leadership development, and to me, a huge aspect of leadership is service. And I'm wondering if you saw that reflected back to you in the kids that you served and supported, and how your servant leadership heart was reflected back to you in terms of how you helped kids become leaders themselves.
Yeah, I think while teaching student leadership, we always would focus on being a servant leader. We said things like leaders eat last. It's kind of a cliche, but if you're running an event or doing something, the leaders in the group need to make sure that everyone else is being served before they, serve themselves. And I think that was always a philosophy that we tried to hold in our student leadership program. And for me, personally, I always just felt like that I needed to serve my kids. I needed to always do what was best for my students. I needed to give them the opportunities to experience leadership, to take risks, to grow, to develop as young people. And I think as I was always so impressed by what my kids were able to accomplish. And I think that's sort of how they gave it back to me. And then as I transitioned into admin, I've always said, and I think Carli will laugh, I always kind of come back to doing what's best for kids and making sure I'm serving kids. And so I try to do that in my relationship with kids, trying to give them every opportunity to succeed, give them all the support that they can, think about things differently to see if they can find success. And I do the same thing with staff. I think we always have to remember that we need to do what's best for kids. We need to serve our students. So what can we do as staff to support them, to give them the opportunities that they need to succeed and flourish? And that has really ended up driving me to do some of the work that I've been lucky enough to do with innovation and trying to rethink what school looks like as a way to maybe allow more kids in our system to flourish.
Carly, Sandy just mentioned digging in with both kids and staff members in terms of developing them as educators and as people. And I know that since the pandemic, both of you have really dug in with staff to provide service and to provide support and leadership. Tell us a little bit about some of those efforts to help shift mindsets or shift practice, especially as the pandemic has hit.
Of course, all of us were working from home and learning from home together in the pandemic. And Sandy and I started to really think about what we could do to help our staff make that transition to this virtual space with their students. And that led us to surveying our staff on what they thought their needs would be. And then from there, we started to put together these webinars, thinking that it would just be maybe 15, 20 that would turn up to hear what we had to say. And those ended up getting shared board wide. We ended up doing, I think, I don't know, Sandy, 5?
Yeah.
4 or 5?
I think so, 4 or 5.
And we ended up at some of them having like 150 people, 200 people come, they were recorded, people were sharing them. And we realized people were really looking to engage, even amidst all of the busyness and the chaos that people were experiencing, trying to work from their homes with whatever their situation was. These people were still really wanting to dig in and do what's best for kids, which was really inspiring for the both of us and kind of kept us, pushing to keep putting out more content and trying to provide this. So it was a really neat thing for the both of us, even though it kept us up sometimes till 1, 2 in the morning, trying to put these together, as Sandy bossed me around with what the slide deck should look like. And no, I can't put that meme in there and move that graphic over. It was really a pretty
Very
awesome.
particular about my slide decks.
It was a real, I don't know. And Sandy, I think you'd agree. It was like a real standout moment, I think, for us as a team, as the two of us.
Yeah.
But you guys were accomplishing this, and I want our listeners to know you were accomplishing this. First, you started out as an in-person team, a team in the same bricks and mortar school, and with the shift to distance learning for so many students in your district, you actually shifted, Sandy, to become a distance learning vice principal. And so I'm really curious how you were able to maintain your positive outlook and how you were able to maintain your energy, in addition to having Carly boss you around with slide decks. How did that shift go for you, and how were you able to sustain your own energy to keep making a difference for other people?
Like, I'm not going to lie, it's been a lot of work, and there's been some trying times. The shift to being distance learning VP at the very start was like, it was nuts. Like, we were working around the clock, basically building a school from scratch, timetabling it, scheduling it, getting all of our teachers up to speed on the virtual learning platform, getting kids in classes and working with the students and families to get them comfortable learning online. So it was a lot, but I just came back. I really do believe that we need to take some of the opportunities that have come out of this pandemic to reimagine education to better prepare our kids for this like crazy world that we're living in. That's something that I've been talking about with Carly a lot. We've been talking about together prior to this whole pandemic. Some of the conversations we've had with some of the thought leaders in our community, there's been this thing called like a COVID bump. And it's kind of pushed organizations and systems to move and adapt more quickly. And I think that's been the case in education. And I think there's a real opportunity to take some of the things that we've been sort of forced to do in COVID and continue to do them. And I think some of that's really where I get my passion and my energy. Is I'm really excited about these ideas to think about education differently, to think about how we can serve our kids differently, to how we can leverage technology to support good pedagogy, to get at that deep learning that I think is what our kids need. I would say I just always come back to that. It's something I really care about. It's something that I'm really interested in. I enjoy it. It actually lifts me up when I devote time and energy and getting to work with people like you and with Carly. Carly and I have developed a really strong partnership, and I'm really excited about the things that we're doing. So it kind of just feeds my energy and keeps me going.
And people are showing up. And that's the other part, is that we spend all this time, from 8 p.m. till 2 a.m. or whatever, developing these things that we really hope people will find meaningful and helpful. And they do. They keep coming to whatever, we're putting out there. And so that, you ask, how is it reflected back at you? Just the fact that teachers are showing up at 7:30 at night after this long day to engage in more PD to make things better. It just shows that there is that desire for more and to innovate and to take those risks. And I think we've really tried to focus on creating the conditions where people feel safe to embrace some of the challenges of this COVID-19 pandemic and to kind of flip them into opportunity. And so it's been really neat to see some of those things bloom.
Like Carli and I are firm believers that nothing can replace the relationship between a student and a teacher, and how important that face-to-face connection in between students and teachers, but also between classmates. But we also believe, or I do in particular, that there is a way that we can use some of the things that we've been forced to do, like using technology or leveraging technology to sort of add to that good pedagogy. And so we're now starting to think about, what are those opportunities? What are those lessons that we've learned through this that we need to apply moving forward so that we can kind of keep pushing and keep innovating in education?
A common thread I keep coming back to with my guests and with both of you, Sandy and Carli, is that relationships are the foundation of everything good that we do. I recognize, just like you have, that the pandemic has fundamentally changed how we interact with one another, and it's how our relationships can be started and how they can grow. I mean, let's face it, the three of us are interacting by Zoom right now. So I see you on a little, 1x2-inch screen. And this is how so many of us are interacting with each other. It's always mitigated by something, whether it's a screen or a mask or by physical distance. So there are many, many reasons why communication and relationships shouldn't be flourishing now. But I think people are hungry. I think people are hungry for connection, and you guys are offering that connection. So they're showing up. And when they show up, that feeds your sense of, yeah, we're onto something. And you start to get this wonderful cycle of positive reinforcement and positive connection, and then positive learning that ultimately benefits the kids.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it's all about. And at the very end of it all, it does come down to the students and finding new ways to, remove those barriers that are so entrenched in education, right? Like that focus on curriculum and that focus on, the layering to get to a goal. And instead, we're really hoping to widen the scope, for educators so that they feel empowered to, move in different directions than perhaps what they've done before.
Guys, when I think of innovation, or when I think of technology or high tech, sometimes we think clinical, we think procedural, we think computers and chips and silicon, and we think of advances in technology that may leave humanity behind. Where do you guys see the intersection between innovation, high technology, and people? Where do you see the intersection of those things with things like love and consideration, kindness, affection, service? Where do you see those coming together?
Well, I think that's where we separate ourselves as humans. I think jobs that can be automated will be automated. I think that's why it's so important that we in education are focusing on developing competencies or skills that are going to be so important in this age of the advancements in tech. The ability to think critically, to collaborate, to communicate with others, to love and to care, and to make people feel connected. That's what separates us from machines or technology. And so that's where I think, like, we talk a lot about innovation and education, but really it's more of just a focus on those skills, on developing global competencies, a continuous learning mindset, the ability to adapt, and the resiliency, I think, are the things that we need to focus on in education. And I think doing that has to happen in a way where you're building relationships, building connections between people, making them feel cared for and safe so that they can take those risks.
And if you think about that too, in the sense of, from an equity lens, this is the way that we are going to catch all of our learners. We're always looking for that way to bring into the fold our most at-risk learners and those students that aren't connecting in a traditional classroom. And I think Sandy and I really believe that by harnessing these global competencies that Sandy talked about is a way to create more equity in our classrooms and to really honor the student and their voice, their experience, what they're bringing into the space, and allowing them to drive the learning. And when you do that, you perhaps can catch a student that you might not catch with just going through the curriculum strands, right? And so we really also see this as a way to continue to embrace our most at-risk learners and to make sure that everybody has, that opportunity to see themselves being successful. And that's also been a really neat thing that we've seen kind of emerge in our thinking and research that we've been doing.
Sandy and Carli, as creators yourselves and as innovators, what has the process of creation and innovation brought back to you in terms of helping understand yourself better as a leader, as a parent or family member, as a community member? So by creating content, we put things out into the world, and when we see what we put out there reflected back to us, it helps us strive for even greater and greater clarity of purpose. So how have you seen your efforts as innovators and creators reflected back to you, and how does it help you understand yourself as a growing leader and community member?
Oh, that's a big question, Brad. For me, I think it's really shown me that this is the place that I should be. I think I said earlier that we would administer for the entire day, like 7:30 in the morning till 4:30. And then, we'd break, we'd spend time with our families, we'd make dinner. And then at 8:30 at night, we're back online together doing this. And not once did that ever seem tedious or tiresome. It really was like the most exciting part of my day. And so it really just solidified for me that this is the role that I should be in. This is what's, feeding me and lighting my fire. And it is what I really, truly love. And so that in itself has been a huge gift, right? Knowing that, finally I am doing the job that, is right for me.
Yeah, that's a good answer, Carli. I would say I definitely agree with a lot of what Carli said. Like, I think what I've learned, and I've sort of mentioned it already, is that this is really what I'm passionate about and what I care about and what I believe needs to happen in education. And I think it's also taught and made me think about like my own role in making that happen. And Carli touched on it a little bit. We've done a lot of learning in the last year just around sort of anti-racism and equity. And so I've done a lot of thinking, and that I think has contributed to my growth as a leader and as a community member. I think I also, just being honest, I think I want to go ahead. I want to go forward. Let's move it. In some of these conversations, some of the things that have stuck out is that you kind of have to like go slow now so you can go fast later. Like sometimes I need to like slow myself down. We need to be present. We need to be enjoying what we're doing now and living in the moment with our kids and our families and in the relationships. And I think that's sometimes that come back to that what we're doing is pretty awesome. I got a great family. I'm working with people I love and care about and doing fun things. It's just trying to enjoy that too.
I'd like you guys to imagine it's 15 years down the road and your kids or the students that you're serving right now discover this podcast and they recall Sandy Millar, Carli Parsons. In a sentence or two, what do you hope they say or remember about you? Carli.
I would just hope that they would remember feeling cared for and supported, because I think ultimately if we've learned anything in this pandemic, it's that when everything else is gone, all we have are those connections. And so I hope that I've done that for anyone that I've worked with or, my friends, my family. That's what I hope that they would think.
Sandy.
Carli just puts it so beautifully. Like I would say pretty well the same. Like I would hope my kids and the students that I work with and the staff just knew that I cared about them and that I was, that I wanted them to succeed and to have every opportunity to succeed.
This has been a tremendous conversation, and I'm so grateful to connect with you tonight and to dig deeper on what makes you lead the way you do, what makes you serve your community the way you do, and how you are innovating connection forward as well. Sandy, Millar, Carli Parsons, thank you so much for being with me.
Oh, you're welcome. And thanks for having us, Brad. It's really been fun.
Yeah, thanks so much. That was great.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the Good News, Brad News podcast. Please like, subscribe, and leave a comment wherever you found this podcast. And if you like what you heard, please recommend Good News, Brad News to a friend. And please hit me up on Twitter. I'd love to hear from you. You can find me at Brad, BRAD, _Hughes, HUGHES. I look forward to hearing from you and to reconnecting with you on our next episode. Until then, get out there and do amazing things.